All right. Thank you very much for joining. Good morning. Have you had a good night's sleep? Not too much drink yesterday? All right. Okay. This is modular code. Okay? So if anyone picked the wrong room, then you have a chance to get out now. Right. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. My name is Claus Lavendt. I'm from Denmark in Europe. I run a company called Mathematics. I've been around since '94 on the FileMaker platform and have done several of these sessions. So let's jump into it. What's in it for you? Well, you will learn some new concepts. Or maybe it's not new, but at least I put it into some concepts on how to code smart. There will be some tricks that you can apply immediately, which is probably always good. And then we're going to look into code, right? You're all code people, so that's hopefully something you will like. And the demo file we are looking at is there for download. So that's what you can expect. So on the agenda is we are going to talk about what is modular code. So let's get to it, find out what are we really talking about. Then I'm going to dig into the concepts of function and utility scripts versus flow scripts. That's the concepts I'm going to maybe introduce or reiterate. And then we're going to look at the code examples. So we can code smart and reduce code, and then finally some Q&A. Sounds okay? Yeah. Awesome. So let's start with why should we even bother do any modular code or be interested, right? So this looks like fun, right? Real fun. No, it isn't. So let's say. Well, I don't know, maybe they like it, sorry, shouldn't speak, but you know, repetitive work is rarely something we strive to do. So that is really why modular code would be something to pursue. So what is modular code? Let's dig into it. Well, it really is about reusable code. It's something that we can use again and again. And in order to get to that, we are looking to do some abstraction. That's where it becomes interesting for us as developer, where we are going to abstract our code and then finally separate functionality from logic. So hopefully after this session you'll have some more ideas on how to approach this. So reusable code is like simple code you can use again and again, instead of writing similar code. So there are so many parts in a system, or when you get to a new system, that is, oh yeah, that's over and over again, right? And instead of doing that, it could be better to write some modular code that you could reuse again. Okay. And why should we really do this? Well, in our solutions, we try to avoid duplicate data. Right? We want to have one set of data and refer to it all over. Why shouldn't we do the same with our code, right? So looking into the abstraction part, that's where it really gets fun, right? Because you need to adjust your thinking unless you're already abstract by nature, right? Which could be. I'm one of those, maybe there are more. So the variable code is really what we're looking for, instead of doing hard coding stuff. Of course, we will always do some hard coding, but wherever possible, look to do some variable stuff. And over the last couple of years, 5, 6, 7 years, FileMaker has given us even more great script steps that can be variable. So the point is to use calculations instead of hard coding fields, right? I'm going to dig into the code so maybe it makes more sense later on. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about is how we should separate functionality from logic. Okay? Functionality is about what is. The functionality is like a function, like a script step, right? We have several script steps, set field, but you never use set field on its own. It's always with something else. Maybe you need to commit it, right? Or send mail is a script step, but you need to feed it with something. You need to do some error handling as well. The logic is the business logic that you put into the solution. It's like, why do you even want to send an email? Well, it's because we are running a flow that consists of several steps that make sense on a business logic place, right? So what I'm really talking about is scripts. So let me go into the concept of the scripts here. Now I'm not saying that there is only 3 types of scripts, of course, but for the purpose of looking to modular code, I really think we are into 3 types of scripts, where the flow scripts is those you build where you identify problems in the business and say, okay, we can automate this stuff by doing this, and that, right? But in order to do that flow, there will be some functions that you need, some functionality that you need to do in between. And the functionality is like the function scripts. So a function script is like, think of it as a script step, but you can build your own script step, which is kind of cool. Not compiled into a single step, but still, right? And the utility script is really something that do something. Really? It's a script that you utilize to do maybe a transformation of data or do something else that can be used all over again. It's kind of a subscript to a function. Could be used on its own as well. I'm going to dig into some code so maybe it makes more sense later. Right? So I even have slides here. Yeah. So the flow scripts contains the business logic, really. And that's where many people are also putting in all the functionality and utility stuff. The idea here is to separate that in order to utilize it all over. Function scripts, yeah, it's like a script step, but they can hold much more complex code. And you can write them to your needs and your likings as well. We all have preferences to this. And like I said, the utility script will work as a subscript, kind of, which could, for example, be transforming data. So the idea is that everything starts from a flow script, and then utilizing a function script that might utilize some other utility scripts along the way, right? So that's the idea.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a bold statement here. Never ever do hard coding in your script, right? I know it will not be possible. But here is an example of a search request where we enter find mode, set a couple of fields, do a new request, and set another couple of fields. Now, the great thing about this is that it's super fast to do. However, you need to go in and change the script and do a lot of stuff, and then it's only working for this part of your solution, right? So don't do this, or I should do that, but it's in the concept of modular code. You should never put hard-coded fields in. So instead, and I realize this is more lines, but this is a search script that does exactly the same thing as before. However, by putting in a JSON as a script parameter, it can be extended or simplified on the purpose of what you're doing. And this one is even only doing a search. And what happens after a search? So let's say you have a solution where you have a list view and a form view. If you find more than one record, you might want to show the list view. If you only find a single record, you might want to show the form view, right? So that functionality can be built into a script like this. And why should you do that? Well, it's the same functionality you would like to have over and over. So instead of building all those steps with, maybe if we found more than one record, then we are gonna go to the list view, or one record to a form view, or maybe something else should happen that you want as a standard. Instead of having to write that all over the place, you just have a single script that can do everything. Does that make sense? Yeah. So just looking at the parameters here, I realize this requires you to dig into JSON if you're not already into that. But it's pretty simple here. And no, I didn't update this code with the newest functionality that Dave was talking about yesterday. But that's really awesome, where you don't need to put in the object number in the array. But basically, you're just saying criteria, the field name, the value, and field name and value, and then another criteria, and then the script takes care of it. And that could even be expanded with more information like, do the standard functionality of going to list view with more than one record found, and or form view, if not, or send an email or turn on the coffee maker or whatever you wanted to do afterwards. Right. And this is just the part of the code where we get in the script parameter. I'm going to dig into the code later, but basically we are just looping through that JSON and setting the fields, set field by name, using variables, and then we are going to perform the search at the end, right? So this is just for a search. And I took this example because I realized that well, it can be very complex, but a search, that's something we do all over and all the time. So hopefully that made a little more sense. All right. So already time for demo. Are you ready? You're so quiet. It's early. You can take a nap then. Concentrate. Focus. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I have a super simple, just a starter solution with a few contacts here, so nothing about that. Imported some random contacts here. So here we have the so here we have the simple search script, right? So we can run it and it will find 18 records, sure enough, like this. So that's one way of doing it, which is, yeah, it works, but it's not very modular. You have to go in and change it all the time. No. Instead, let's look into a flow script here. Let's get too big. Right. So the idea here is that we want to find some people in this contact database. We want to send them an SMS, and then we want to send them an email. Right. That's part of the flow here. So looking into the code here, and that's another thing where your flow scripts become a bit more compressed, at least if it's doing a lot of things, because you ship off the handling of a lot of the functionality to other scripts instead. So it's easier to have a good overview. So the first thing is to perform the search. So how do we do that? Well, here is the someone has to fix the doors. Don't leave. Yeah. Right. So this is what we saw before, right? A few lines of JSON code to say I would like to have a search in this field name. Is that better? Yeah. So I want to have a search for this field name. Use the get field name in order to get the name of the field instead of the value of the field. And using these functions, it also works when you change the field name, if you should be so bold to do that. And then a value, in this case it's just very hard-coded, right? And then we add another criteria, which means that, that the function is automatically just adding a new request. So as soon as you get tuned into this type of parameters, it will become something you can do in your sleep, I promise. All right, easy enough. So here we have the function call and we get a result back, and here I added no error handling, right? But of course there should be some error handling. In case nothing was found or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I left this open in order to make it easier. So what happens in this function script, right? First off, whenever I write a function script, I always put in here, these steps are those that I need to copy and paste into my flow scripts. Then they are just sitting there. The only thing I need to do is to open the parameter step and just modify this one. And I leave it here with the example. So, oh yeah, I totally get what I was talking about or thinking of. Or my colleagues are totally in on it as well. So basically, the only thing I need to care about whenever I look at this script, in using it, is those lines up here. The rest should just work, right? So here comes the part with the, again, I just put it in as a comment. So what we're doing here is enter the find mode. We are going to count how many criteria are there in total. That's important for our loop. And I'm very explicit in my code, so it's easy to see that, okay, criteria count is set in a variable of its own. You can write code that is more dense, but it's more difficult to read afterwards. And in order, we typically do this in order to allow new people on the block to easier understand the code instead of having to learn something more complicated. So we set the criteria count here. Exit if we are more than what we have. Then field total is where we count how many fields are we going to set. So here is an inner loop that is setting the fields. We are just taking the field name and the value, we set it into a field, and then we loop until we have set all the field in this criteria. Then we are doing another, in this request, and then we are doing another request if there were more, and then finally perform. Right? We get a result that in this case is pretty simple. It's just get last error. So that's the result we are pushing back to the original script. So simple enough, right? All right. You are as excited as I am. Okay, good. So what happens? Now we have found something. So let's step here, just in, right? So we're stepping here. This one on so you can see what's going on. Yeah, we have plenty of time. Right, so criteria total, criteria count, 0. And I'm using 0 because this is JSON, so we start with 0 instead of 1. In case anyone wondrous. We're stepping through. We have the first one. Now we set the field, the first field. Now we set the second field. Yep, that's it. We have no more fields. Then a new criteria. Set this one. Fields. This one. And no more criteria. So awesome. We found something, which is great. So no error. Perfect. All right. So now we have found something. We have found a list of contacts, and we want to do something about it, right? So the thing we would like to do is to send an SMS. And no, this is not a new secret feature of FileMaker that sends out SMSs for free. So, but what we're doing here is we are setting something, and this is where some magic also happens, and ideas, and that's really what's cool about this technique. Is it's really based on the parameters of the functionality of the function script, right? So in this case, we are gonna send out an SMS. So we can do some validation and put in some comments here saying, okay, so 1, send all that can be sent. 2, if any fails validation, don't send anyone. Right? So that can be in situations where you say, yeah, just send out everything you can and ignore that someone fails, right? Or no, I want to have everyone going through all or nothing, right? So there's some optional stuff here where if you want a specific sender name, maybe there's another API key that needs to be done for these calls other than what is default. Maybe there's another URL that should be used. In this case, maybe there's another gateway that needs to be used. And then you have an array here of recipients with the phone number, the country codes, and then the message, right? So that's the first one, that's the second one I put in here. So that's just 2. And building up this one with an array, that's just putting a loop before to fill out this, this parameter. In this case, I just hard-coded it in order for making it simple. But that would normally be a step that is within here to loop through the list and grab the phone numbers and so on. Right? And then we are going to do the SMS stuff here. The result is coming back, and I'm just putting in a note that, yeah, sure, we should do some handling of the result, which might not be an error, but it could be this message has been sent, so maybe we want to create a record with what did we actually send in this message, when was it sent, and so on. What was the result for each of the contacts, or maybe we just want to mark the list, and you know, that's stuff that goes to the business logic. So that could be kind of anything. So in the example here, I'm just not going to handle anything, but let's dig into the function script here of sending the SMS, right? So again, the first couple of lines is those to be copied and pasted into the flow scripts, right? So what's going on here is that first off, I'm gonna make sure that my settings has been here. The reason I'm using settings, what do I really mean? Let's look at the setting scripts here. It's just setting a variable with a JSON, and I know I'm going to say JSON so many times in this session, but for these purposes, it's really a great tool. So what I have in here is hopefully not any secrets. I didn't. Great. No, what I have in here is, and I like to use, comments, as you can see, because it's to separate stuff, but I like to put the settings that doesn't really change into a script parameter, into a variable. and then that script is just set as a part of the startup here. So why don't I just have a settings table, or, well, we also do that, and that's fine in some cases, but for modular code, this is much easier to move around in different solutions if you don't have to depend on the schema. So that's why I'm putting it in here, and when you set it up, it rarely changes, right? These defaults. And if they change, you could go in and modify the scripts, and then you're done, right? So SMS settings, the email settings, and so on. So that's the setting script. That is, and that's why I named it start as a part of the startup procedure, your startup script. And then when we get into the function here, I'm just going to make sure that if it's not set already, then I'm going to run this setup here. Okay, and then something that is extremely important when dealing with SMS and email. That's actually another reason why I put precisely these two examples in here. Is that we don't want emails or SMS going out by mistake, right? No, we don't. So I built in something as a feature saying, okay, so when we're testing, this is depending on where does this file sit. Does it sit on the live machine? What is the host name here? And if the host name is not, in this case, my host, which should be the live host, then we are in debug mode, meaning that, whatever I collect, I'm not going to send out to that one. I'm going to send out to the debug email or SMS. And the debug email and SMS is just defined right down here. Where if we are in debug mode, then we have a debug number, or this is the SMS. So it's the same for the email. So we have a debug number. We would like to test going out, but if you by mistake is sending out 10,000 SMSs, then your phone is going to be flooded, right? But at least it's only your phone. Same with your mailbox, right? This script actually stems from one of our function scripts that we are using all over, which is why I put in here. I wrote this script here, so I put in a notification to my colleagues saying, do not touch anything below if you're ever gonna put in here, because that's where it really is tested, right? So that's a note for that. So now we have an array of phone numbers and messages, and we don't want to try to send out an SMS to a landline or to space or whatever, right? So that's where let's take what we got in here, ship it off to the utility script, and then the utility script can validate the numbers here. It's and let's go in and see how that looks. Right, so we get the parameters in here, then we're going to loop through and say, is it valid? So, and this is a very simple validation, by the way, right? So this is basically just saying for this example, I just have the country code of Denmark and Belgium in here. But that's something you can look up. I think I actually, somewhere, I put it in the notes where I had this validation from. I'm sure there's something for the US as well. But the idea is that in order to validate whether this is a mobile phone or not, you can look, depending on the country, you can look on the first 2 or 3 or digits of the phone number, and then you can determine whether this is a mobile or a landline. And if it's not a mobile, then we invalidate this number. And then depending on what we call the original function script with, should we stay or go? Should we send out? Or should we just reject all or nothing? It can take care of that. So this is super simple validation of a mobile number. There's also APIs you can utilize. So, and that's another reason for using this setup with modular code. If you're sending out, let's say you're sending out SMSs all over your system for whatever reason, right? and then you decide that no, this simple validation is simply not good enough. I want to use an API to validate. You just go in here, change it in the utility script, and it works all over. Don't have to copy that code all over the place again. That's another main reason for using this modular approach. Right. So what's going on here is that we are just adding a property to the existing JSON that we got in with the array, the phone number and the message and so on. We just adding another property in there saying, is this phone number valid or not? And then we are shipping it back to the original script. Are you with me? Oh, sorry. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Good. You already knew everything here, right? Okay, so what's going on here is that we are just setting the stuff that is needed for this API to call, and the idea is that let's take from the parameters this API URL in case there was something. If there was nothing, then let's take the default that we just had in the setup. This allows for overriding the defaults during this approach, and that's simply the same for all. In this case, it's probably just the sender that could be interesting, where you can put in a name, right? Is this sent from Claus, or is this sent from Apple, or is this sent from whatever, right? And maybe sometimes you want to override what is default. This is sent from customer service. This is sent from, hey, you want something, or I don't know what you're doing with that. But anyway, we are doing this, and then in this loop, this part is actually not really interesting, but it is basically just using insert from URL, doing a curl call to this particular API and sending off in that format. Again, we choose to change the gateway. There will most likely be something else beside the API key and the URL that you need to modify. Typically, the properties are named differently, or the format is different, right? So that is something you can just do here, and then it works for all places where you call it from. That makes sense, right? All right, good. So now we have sent out the SMS and get the result back. Okay, actually one thing I needed to point out here is that we are doing this, blah, blah, blah. Then there's some specific error handling. Blah, blah, blah. Where is it? Here it is, yes. So again, we have this array, this JSON array. We originally inserted it with a phone number and a name and the message to send. Then we validated, so we added a property to the JSON object in the array. And now we have sent it, or at least we tried to send it, and we got a result back from the API. That result is put into another property, meaning that when this function script has run, we have enriched the parameters that we sent in, and when we're getting it out, you can handle it by running through, and you have the numbers, you have everything, so you don't need to be explicitly in context in order to handle the result. And then you can go in and mark or create another record or whatever you need to do, which could be another function script, of course, in order to handle the result and see this SMS was sent, this was not. Okay? And with the flow here, it's totally the same for the email part. You know how often you send out an SMS and then an email, but maybe it happens, right? But again, here, well, there's just a couple of more information in an email, like who is it to, the name, the CC, the BCC, the subject, the body. Yeah, and then you could, of course, put in attachments. right? And refer to that, and then handle it. In this case, we are again looking for making sure that the settings is set. Debug mode. If you don't take anything other from my session, please take away that. Go home and make sure that you have debug mode feature built into anywhere where you're sending email and SMS from, right? You're from Europe, you can be punished very roughly if you make such a mistake. All right, so it's the same. We put in the parameter with information, then we are running through the function and we enrich this JSON that we feed back to the caller, and then we can handle that. In this case, I just use the send mail script steps, which is the most easy part, right? But if you want to send with Outlook or Gmail or whatever, you might want to integrate their API. So using this function script, you can just replace the part that is actually sending out the email and getting a response from the email server, whether you're using SMTP or using an API or whatever, or changing provider or whatever you're doing. You can just change that in one place and then it works all over. And if you're working with colleagues on a function or on a solution, no one needs to care about what's going on here. This is all handled, right? Okay, I know this, I just need to fill in this parameter, ship it off to the function script, and then I get a result back, and whatever happens here, I don't have to care about it. I don't need to know about it, right? The idea also with these types of function script is that you can spend more time building these because it's something you'll use over and over and over again, right? So they need to be really good and really handled, right? If you do the same code again and again and again, we tend to be lazy, and we do it as well. Set error capture on, meaning that suppress everything FileMaker comes with. Okay, so you're responsible for error handling. Do you do that? No, right? I'm sure we all do that. But we should, of course, do proper error handling. With the concept of the function scripts and the utility scripts, it's totally okay to spend 10, 15 minutes more, or maybe a half an hour, maybe an hour more on that script, because it's not a one-off. It's something you're going to use over and over again, right? So that's the idea. With this, the mail script is completely the same. And again, the validate the email addresses is, in this case, just you'd like to read. I'm doing such a simple one, making sure there's an add and there's a dot, right? But you can also utilize API and see, is this a real real email address? Is it working, or is it just a fake one? If that really works well, but anyway, you can do that if you like, right? So that's the idea of the modular approach here. Then let's recap. So what we talked about here was the concept of flow scripts, function scripts, and utility scripts. We should use reusable code. It's easier to maintain. You get more robust code because you spend more time really building it robust, and modular code makes you much more productive. That's a statement I make. I hope you will agree, at least when you apply that. So let's have fun, right? Now we have built all these functions, then we can relax some more. All right, Q&A, and there are no mics. Yeah. Yes?
What is your experience? Thank you for the presentation, by the way. It's very sound, very good, very conceptualized, very rigid. My question is, do you have any experience with performance? Is it improving? Stays it the same in your experience, or is it not so?
It is the same.
Okay.
Pretty pretty much. I mean, it's more robust, but the performance is pretty much the same. Again, depending on what you're doing in your utility scripts, right? But if you're writing the same, it's natural. If you call an API to validate a mobile phone number, it takes a bit of time, right? But performance, there's no difference. No. If you could measure it, it would be in milliseconds. So yeah, nothing to speak about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have recommendations of where to store or place these scripts so that the whole team has access to them? Do you put them in a separate file? Do you?
No. Well, typically we for most of these systems we build, we have a big UI file, and it's kind of the main file, and then several data files, utility files sometimes as well, right? So I like to have all that is related to the UI, so in the same file. So we have it there, but sitting in a folder named functions, and I think actually, well, the naming is, today I like to name it this way, tomorrow I like to name it another way, right? And my colleague is just as well the same, right? We are mostly creative people in this community, so typically we have a folder about modular scripts, and then the function scripts are there to pick, and then utility scripts are something that you don't need to bother about, so they are more below in another folder. So everyone just knows module or global scripts, sometimes we call it that. So yeah.
Do you have a standard list of modular scripts that you use in all of your apps?
Well, more or less, yeah. We feed them out, and then we have a repository as well where we feed them out. I'd like to say that we have versioning control and everything handled, right? But no, and we always, if there's an update to the script, we always push it all over. In reality, that's not happening, but if I'm changing something to, let's say, the email scripts, then I notify my colleagues and say, hey, I modified this, so now it's much more robust, or actually I discovered there was a bug in the previous one. Please make sure that on the other solutions you are touching, then replace it as soon as possible. And that's the updates policy, right? So, yeah. But again, most of these could be relevant anywhere. So, yeah.
When you say, you even in a repository, what does that look like specifically?
It's a FileMaker file.
It's just a FileMaker file.
It's a hosted FileMaker file that is, we call it DM Toolbox. So we have many of the tools that are built and is on the brainbasket.com. Don't know if you know that site, but there's several free files there. We have combined them. Actually, it's called SVG Gallery from a free file, and then never renamed it, so we just put in some more features in there and collected it, and both the scripts and storing it as XML. So yeah, that's it. Yep.
How did you zoom into individual panels in the script works?
Well, there is a guy here around who is building a nice plugin called Christian Smith, the MBS plugin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have it. I didn't know it could do that.
And it's actually a free feature. Yeah. Of his plugin. Any other questions? Yeah.
Claus. Generally speaking, do you have an approach for how to handle layouts? Like, do you hard code layouts, or do you use abstraction most of the time in those cases?
Yeah. Well,
For the go to layout script step as well.
exactly. Yeah. I didn't show it here, but that's another part of modular coding, of course. We have a naming convention that we follow pretty much. It's very small, but there's a few things that is really important. Like the table names always have a prefix. So for contacts, it would be CON_contact. And all the layouts that is related to contacts is prefixed with CON. Then it could be details, list view, picker, whatever, something. That's the layout name. Then we have a custom function where you input what is the module prefix. So it's something with context. I want to have the list layout. And then we just put that in as 2 parameters, and then the custom function grabs out the exact layout name, and then we say go to layout by name, and then that name. I could have shown that as well, but time is limited. Yeah.
When you start to abstract, like set fields and photo layouts, is there anything that you might do so that years down the road you have this giant file and you're trying to clean it up, and you're like, I have all these unreferenced things, but probably still need anything you can put in place as a result from deleting something that's not used.
Yeah. I get your point. Although there are really, really great tools for analyzing your code, precisely that part is where I don't look because I get false errors, right? But no, in general, you know, we have a statement with us saying, do you want to create a field? Why? You need to argue if you want to create a field. It's not allowed to create a field or a table unless you can argue for it. Well, that's to hold a summary. Why do you need to hold a summary or a calculation? Why do you need that? Is that really something that belongs in the schema, or is it a UI feature? Now we have layout calculations. We have so many other ways of displaying something that's calculated now, right? So that's the rule. And, you know, I wish that we always followed that rule, right? For some of our bigger customers, we have a DBA appointed, a database administrator. His task is to be responsible. No one is allowed to create fields or tables in the schema. Only he can do that. So you actually need to ask your colleague, can I get another field? So you need to argue for that. And there's several reasons for doing that. Well, let's keep the schema as clean as possible, but it's also a matter of when doing deployments, how much do we need to deploy? Do we need to do a full deployment, or is it just a UI file or whatever, right? So that's another reason for that. And also to keep track of when did that field get added and what's the purpose of it and the values and so on, right? Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, one of the benefits of doing this is that you don't need to clean up your scripts as often because you don't have those stray little scripts that are just performing those specific actions.
Sure.
So, and rather than managing 500 scripts in a file, you're managing maybe 30 or 50.
Yeah.
So it actually eliminates a lot of the need to go back through and clean up the orphan scripts because, you know, there aren't as many.
Exactly. Don't do the same thing over and over again, right? That's really the point. Yeah. Sure.
So what type of data in JSON are you using? The passing data, date?
Yeah, date.
Type of data parameter.
Well, that's a string. Dates are string K, right? Because there's no data type of date in the JSON.
Yes.
So the only way is to use a string.
Yes, I'm using the string too, but the string style of the date value is relying on the language.
Sure. Yeah, I totally get that. And well, the good thing is that we live in Europe or the rest of the world beside US. When it comes to date format, I mean, of course, right? No judging. But this, you know, the date format is month, day, year in the US, and rest of the world it's day, month, year, right? And if you're a smart system, you say, okay, we don't care about that year, month, day, right? Actually, FileMaker is able to do the same thing. Don't know if you know that, but if you put in not a dash, not a slash, but a plus year plus month plus day that works in FileMaker as well. It's not really documented, so that was a small trick.
Sometimes I convert it to number.
Yeah. And convert back to date. Yeah, sure, makes sense. Or because you're in charge of what's going on, you decide, okay, let me write my own format here. And since you have that format and you know what it is, then you also know how to deal with it on the other side, right? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna append to like the string thing. We have a lot of systems that are in Europe or Asia and the US with users in both locales. So
Sure.
if you're passing dates in JSON, numbers are generally the safer bet, like, because we've definitely gotten caught off by that. So
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
wanted to throw that out there. If you have a system that might have multiple date formats, numbers are safer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sure. Right, yeah.
From what I saw from the demo, the utility scripts could easily be a custom function. Do you also
Sure.
maintain a utility custom functions list, or you prefer the script? And what are the advantages if you do?
Yeah, well, custom functions are awesome, right? The great thing is that we have such a rich community and there are people out there writing the most amazing custom functions, right? But they name them differently. They do everything differently. Many years ago when we got the custom functions, I had the idea, okay, so we get a custom function and then I change it to my own format so I know what's going on. And that went on for about maybe 1 month. Then I realized, oh man, never gonna do that. It's never gonna work. So basically, we just copy and paste those custom functions, and we have this repository where if you build a custom function or if you steal a custom function somewhere, you always need to copy that to the repository so everyone else in the team has access to it. So that's it. And the reason for that, especially, is since getting old. For some reason, I don't remember names at all, but I remember that approximately 16 years ago, in maybe that system or that system, I wrote something, and now maybe I could use that, but was it that system or that system or that system, right? Then I need to go and look and try to find it and spend way too much time on that. So that's why the rule is put it in the repository whenever something new, great comes up, because then there's one place to go and look for it, right? Yeah. Other questions? No? Awesome. Yeah.
Do you combine things in your repository at all? Like if you're going to be, say, using one script to call another script, do you like link those together in some way, or?
Yeah, well, typically I really like the modules that only consist of scripts because they are so easy to move around, right? If schema is involved, that adds another layer of complexity, and especially when you have multiplied files, right, with UI files and data files, where the add-on feature is great. By the way, I know that was mentioned in my session title, but I didn't put any effort into explaining add-on modules because Fabrice had a great session yesterday afternoon that you should go and look up to learn more about the add-on feature. He has all the mechanics, so I didn't have to. But that's a great way of moving around. But a folder of scripts that is completely separated from the schema because it's set field by name, it's variables and so on, you can just copy and paste it. So we do that. That's a module. Could be a module. It could also be a custom function that is a module. It really depends on what definition do we put on a module. To me, it's everything that can be reused, more or less, would be a module. But we copy and paste that, and then we have it as an XML representation in the repository, and then we can copy and paste it into the solutions. So, yeah. So they are linked together because it's one block we have there. No more questions. Thank you very much for joining.